it can ignite, and all you gotta do is bring the light. Cause a new light shine, cause a new light shine. Time to get on up, say tradition is mine. Cause a new light shine. Shalom, my friends. Eliana Light here. Welcome to the Light Lab podcast. This is our place to play with prayer and hold the gems of our liturgy to the light and see what shines out. And today we're bringing a really great interview with a partner in that work, musician, educator, playful prayer extraordinaire, Billy Jonas. I brought in Billy to co-lead Sunday morning Tefillah, prayer and liturgy experience, for our Light Lab Tefillah teacher fellows. We had our retreat in June this summer, and Billy and I've learned from him in so many different contexts, and you'll hear how much of an impact Billy and Billy's music has had on me in my life, and I'm so grateful. But we'd never worked on building a prayer service, a prayer gathering like we did, and it was so incredible to work with him. Such an intentional prayer leader. We talked a lot about transitions, and we also got to experiment. There were some curtains involved. You'll get a little bit of that backstory in this interview. But that's really what we've been up to this summer. Has been the first ever Light Lab Tefillah Teachers Fellowship. I also was able to teach about Tefillah at Ramad Darom for their staff week at the New Cage Jewish Education Conference. And coming up later this summer at Let My People Sing, which is super exciting. And there will be more traveling, more philosophizing, so much more. But for now, I want to tell you about our amazing guest, Billy Jonas. Billy Jonas is bridging divides through rhythm and song to heal rifts within ourselves, our families, our communities, and the world. Billy has captivated audiences worldwide since 1987 using voice guitar and industrial repercussion, instruments made from found objects. My favorite is this big, I don't know if it's an oil drum, this big blue canister that rolls on wheels. We'll share some videos, of course, where you can see Billy in action. He tours with the Billy Jonas Band and solo, and works with the Muslim Christian Jewish super trio Abraham Jam. When home, Billy is a member of the sacred music team at Congregation Beth HaTfilah in Asheville, North Carolina. From the White House to the Middle East and beyond, each concert is a soul-spelunking, heart-healing, joy-filled journey, and it is my joy and honor to bring you my interview/conversation with the one and only Billy Jonas. Shalom, Billy. Welcome to the Light Lab podcast.
What a privilege. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh my gosh. It's so amazing to see your face and be here, because we were just together a couple of days ago. Dear listeners, Billy and I led a Sunday morning Shock-arit experience for the Light Lab Tefillah Teacher Fellows. And gosh, I was saying this before we started recording, I had such a great time working with you. I feel like I learned so much and was challenged in all of these really productive and beautiful ways. And I love that we got a little time to debrief that experience for an audience, and also get to ask you some questions about your journey.
I'm looking forward to it. You know, for some of those people, it was way outside of their comfort zone, and it was less Shock-arit than it was Shock-arit. They were just shocked. But maybe that's what we should call it, you know, like Shock-arit service.
Did you just come up with that?
Just now, as you were talking.
Yes.
Shaka. And I totally enjoyed it. I got to try out ideas that I'd been brewing on for a long time, and refine ideas I'd tried at Havana Shira and at Song Leader Boot Camp and at various places, try them in new ways. And I just felt great about it. Even the parts that were a little clunky, and we'll talk about that, because you got to have a flaw in your blanket so the soul can escape, right? So we want to share the good and the opportunities with our listeners.
Oh my gosh, a flaw in the blanket so the soul can escape. Where is that
Well,
from?
there's a Navajo saying, you never want to, if you're doing a
Wow.
weaving, you don't want to complete it completely, because then you lock whatever thoughts and intentions into there. And if there were any misguided thoughts or intentions, they have no way to get out. So it's a way of justifying imperfection and celebrating it and elevating it. And I love doing that. And I think you and I talked about that Passover Seder I did once where we just scripted the whole thing. And I was so proud of it. And then it couldn't breathe. It had to have
Right.
room to just a little bit of wobble and places for people to ask questions that weren't scripted. Like, okay, ask a question. It was so we all have to find that balance, right? And so you don't want to make your whole blanket but you want to have some of it have opportunity.
So what that reminds me of, and I think this is kind of like what it was working together, is everything that we said just kind of zipped and zagged and built on each other. Your friend and mine, Rabbi Joe Black, has this beautiful song, Leave a Little Bit Undone, about
Yes.
the idea of, right, kind of leaving room for that on purpose in understanding that nothing we do ever can really be complete if that's the way that we set it up. So
Yeah.
that's beautiful.
Yeah, and thank you for reminding me that. Absolutely. It's a Navajo wisdom. It's a Jewish wisdom. It's probably a everybody wisdom, but it comes in small sacred packages here and there that aren't always explicit or part of the regular consciousness. And you reminded me thing you said about the prayer book being a book of failures, because every attempt to describe the ineffable in words is doomed to failure, or blessed to failure, however you want to say it. And so here we have this very incomplete attempt to express, the depth of our heart and the heights of our spiritual yearnings and everything. And it's inevitably going to fall short. And we have to find a way to celebrate that.
Amen. Yeah. I told you this, though. Some of this is reiterating, so maybe I should stop saying I told you this for the benefit of our listeners. But even just calling what we're doing a lab has helped me let go of some of that sense of control and perfectionism, and to say, right, in a lab, if you test the hypothesis and the result is that the hypothesis has been proven incorrect, you have still succeeded.
That's right.
Right.
I love that.
You have still succeeded. So I kind of want to take our listeners on a journey through what our goals were, because I wanted to start with the curtains. But first I wanted to start with what were we attempting to do, and some of the more out of the box stuff that we tried, where that impulse came from. Because I don't think it was, we're going to try something wacky just to be wacky.
No.
And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, wacky just for wacky's sake. I mean, there's a place for that, but that was never even part of it. So we were a little wacky in terms of what people might have expected normally. So the curtains. Remember Snidely Whiplash from what is the Moose and Squirrel cartoon?
Well, Dudley Do-Right of Rocky and Bullwinkle. Yes.
Rocky and Bullwinkle, and Snidely Whiplash would always say, "Curses, foiled again." Or curtains. It's curtains for you. I was thinking about that with the curtains because it has nothing to do with our reasoning for the curtains. But every time we wrote curtains into our outline, I was thinking, curtains. It's curtains. So the curtains were like veils, and the veils were opportunities to wipe away the impediments between us and ourselves, our deep selves, our divine selves. And we all have armor. We all have scales in front of us. We all have sort of like things that are separating us from that divine nature. And so we manifested a manifestation of that. And so let me back up, dear listeners. Every service has an architecture. Newsflash, many of you know that, but some of you may have been like me when I was first thinking deeply about services, and you may have been thinking, why does services feel like I'm on a train and we're just passing all these little towns, we go by the Baruch, and we go by the Shema, and we go by the V'ahavta, and we go by the Michamocha, and we go by the Hashkivenu, and we go by, and they just like flash by, and then we're at the end, and it's the Oneg or whatever. It's like, that's where we were headed. And I'm like, no. These are like acupuncture points. These are like sacred places. And if you invest yourself in them, they take you on a transcendent journey. And so the architecture of the service, I've always assumed and embraced this idea that it's an opportunity for a transcendent journey. And I wanted to make that explicit for our leaders, even if they never use a curtain to go through at each of the junctures in that architecture. So we set up a curtain for coming into the space. Whew, people walked in. Then there was another curtain at the juncture between the beginning and the Baruch. And we're ready to pray now. This is our call to prayer. Come through this veil. And all the participants stood up, walked in a big like butterfly wing shape around behind this curtain, and then emerged through it back into their seats. And then we had another one at the Amidah, right? Adonai Sifatai Tiftach, where we're asking ourselves to be conduits. We're asking God to allow us to let go of all this armor so that God can speak through us, so that we are literally conduits to the divine. And we came through the veil again. We had everybody stand up, walk around, and come through. Then where did we do the next one? Do you remember?
At the end of the Amidah, so coming out of Oseh Shalom. And then we did another one at the very end of the service after Aleinu. As
we emerged back into our more mundane or less sacred time selves. It's all one, right? But sometimes we mark it more differently. Anyway, that's what we did. We came through the veils, and we came through these curtains, and we literally had curtains. They were on movable rods, and the rods were curved. So we could stand there and hold them up, and the tops of them were, 10 feet in the air. And it was beautiful, just watching people come through them.
These perfect sticks. Because listeners, when Billy started talking about the curtains, I did not know what that meant. And I was excited, and you were almost, it's so funny, at every step, you were like, and if it's too out there, like, just let me know, we don't have to do it. And I was like, no, I want to do it. I'm so excited to see what this is. So these gauzy curtains that were on these giant sticks made it very easy to pick up and put down, were very gauzy, invited people through them. And part of our goal, I think one of our many goals, or at least one of my many goals, was to give the fellows an experience of tefillah that is incredibly intentional, because one of the things we talk about is choice. That all along the journey from the Siddur becoming what it is to the way that we use it is a choice. People decided which lines from Tanakh to use in their prayer. People decided which pieces of liturgy were going to be in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. People decided the architecture of the service based on human needs, right? There's a difference between what we need in the morning and what we need in the afternoon and what we need in the evening. And there's all of this wisdom in there. And somebody prayed all of those prayers for the first time as a response to the universe. And people decided to bow and to take 3 steps back and 3 steps forward. And when you are leading or creating a tefillah experience, you are also making a whole number of choices. And we attempted to make choices that would help us not just say a thing, but to embody it and to feel it and to do it, knowing that the liturgy is a vessel for our prayer, but it is not the prayer itself. And so the curtains to me were a way of concretizing a feeling of transition by using our bodies and physically transitioning through something. And I was thinking of this when we did our debrief, that, my friend of the pod, poet Alexander Nemser, says that poetry is an attempt to put into words that which can never be put into words. And that ritual is like physical poetry, if that makes sense. I think Casper ter Kuile in The Power of Ritual either him or someone he quotes says that the point of a ritual is to take you from one state to a different state, not like North Carolina and Georgia, a state that you cross this evening, but one way of being to another way of being. And that we could just say out loud, all right, we're transitioning now between communal prayer and personal prayer.
Yeah.
But then, like, what is the whole thing for?
That's like having a Disney movie where you do it like it's Bertolt Brecht and you say, and now the hero will die. And then 20 minutes later, like, let's not give it all away. Let's let there be some mystery and discovery and some participation, creative participation by those saying, what are they doing? What are they building in there? And why did we just do that? I think it becomes co-creative then.
It does become co-creative, and something that I've been rolling around in my head is how much of it should we leave mysterious, and how much of it is it to say, as we go through these curtains, let's feel a sense of transition? Because it was very interesting to hear from the participants, the fellows, what they thought the curtains were for.
Yeah.
And one of my kind of phrases that I say a lot in teaching is making the implicit explicit, that we can think, oh, the Ahava Rabbah is about unconditional love, but it's a different thing to say as we're leading a tefillah, can you invite a feeling of unconditional love into your heart? Because then that just makes it more likely. It makes it more likely that a participant will actually do the thing that the tefillah is inviting us to do, because we often don't see it as active. So yeah, I'm wondering about that balance between mystery and invitation.
In songwriting, we talk about showing versus telling, which is the same thing. Mm-hmm. And you can have a song that says, I feel so sad today, I hope I feel glad tomorrow. Or you can have a lyric that says, flies in the kitchen, I can see 'em buzzing, and I ain't done nothing since I woke up today. How the heck can a person wake up in the morning, come home in the evening and have nothing to say? Make me an angel that flies from Montgomery. Talk about showing. Like, are you in that kitchen with the flies buzzing? Uh-huh. Are you right there? And can you feel the hair stand up on your arms as you have that realization of your resonance maybe with some portion of that picture or not? And so that's the magic that a songwriter is hoping their song will create, to show someone a mirror that's showing them a larger reflection of themselves than a normal mirror, like a deep mythic reflection. And so same thing with what we're doing. We're inviting people to have an embodied experience, to not say, oh, and this is the part for the transition. Like, what's happening? The hair is standing up on my arms. This is beautiful. Feel that on my skin. Oh, right. It's time for that part. Where was I before? It's just to go through all that process of discovery. Then it makes it theirs, as opposed to being told what to do. And you reminded me of something really important, which is humor and jokes.
Yes.
A joke works. Some jokes work, many work, when there's a flip in your consciousness and one person says one thing and you suddenly get that it means something else, and then air comes in and you burst out with this eruption, ha ha ha, and you show your teeth, which is a sign of aggression, right? And you laugh, and you're playing with that edge, that limbic place of like, am I safe? Because suddenly your understanding has shifted and it doesn't feel quite as safe, but you're held in this space with other people all having this experience, or, wherever you're listening. So you're playing with the edge of, I think I'm safe here. Whoa, whole new understanding. It's that same thing. And that's actually peripherally why I like to use humor so much in songwriting and in my Iyunim and my Kavanot, because they open people up. And they create that vibration inside where you're going between, I thought I knew where we were going. Oh, we're going someplace else. That's only slightly related. But that opportunity for shifting realms That's what it's about. Yeah. Showing versus telling, shifting realms, new understandings, flipping your cognitive scripts so that you open to something new.
Yes. I love thinking about the use of humor in that way, because another way of saying that, I think, is that laughter is the release of tension, right? That you create, a joke is creating a tension, and then it resolves in a different way than you expected it to resolve. And that kind of, the laughter releases that tension that has built up.
Yeah.
And we talked about this a lot in the planning, that what we're asking people to do in tefillah is actually incredibly vulnerable. And to do that, you need to feel like you're in, like, isn't it Allstate? You're in good hands. Is that what it is, right?
Yeah.
You want to feel like you're in good hands. And laughter and that release of tension it's a softening mechanism, right? It's in the way that we might invite people into a deep breath. Perhaps laughter or playfulness does the same thing, because I find that a lot. I don't think I'm actually very funny in my everyday life. Like, I wouldn't consider myself a comedian at all. But there's a lot of laughter in tefillah that I lead. And I love that. Just creating that release of tension that allows people, right, to relax into it a little more and to feel like it's not so serious.
I think sometimes people laugh in your presence because they're having so many aha moments, one tumbling over each other. You know, when you were talking about we eat our ideas, we burn our ideas, we wear our ideas. You know, just talking about the manifestation in ritual of ideas, and you could see there was a ripple through the room. Oh, and they were just sort of getting it and grokking it in a whole new way. And there was laughter and giggling, and that was delightful to witness. Yeah.
Yeah, because saying something like, and we let our ideas on fire, is an absurd thing to say on its face.
Right.
But to give a little context, I said this once in the Talmud Torah, the Hebrew school at Bethel, where I am a couple times in the month. They always start Sunday morning with Havdalah. And I was talking with the kids about what Havdalah is attempting to do, right? We talked about ritual moving us from one state to another state. We could just say, Shabbat is over. We're going to miss it. We hope it's a great week, and then I'll go home. But it's not enough to do that, right? We don't just talk about our ideas. We drink our ideas, and we eat our ideas, and we smell our ideas. We move our ideas. We wear our ideas. I haven't even said that. And we let our ideas on fire. Yeah. And that's right. Ritual is an attempt to concretize the ineffable, to help us move from one state to another state.
Mm-hmm. As you said, to concretize the transitions.
Mm-hmm. And transitions are a big deal. And I don't think I have had met a practitioner who cared as much about transitions in tefillah as I did until I started working with you, because you made it very clear that, we were going to plan and write out every transition between tefillot as taking them on a journey, and that it was not just going to be, prayer, that it's the stuff in between that carries us through. And that is so important to me. And it makes intentional tefillah more of a time commitment to plan. I mean, we worked on this a very long time. Yeah. We had many meetings, some in person and some over Zoom. And I know, when I'm working with congregations and clergy, and I ask them how they plan for Friday night, right? And the cantor puts the songs they're going to do, and the rabbi puts where they're going to put a sermon or a kavanah, an intention. And sometimes they're connected, but often they're not. And that's part of why it often feels like a stop. And again, I don't blame them for this. I think clergy have a lot of different jobs. And when there are people in the hospital to visit and meetings to run and sermons to write, and, bar mitzvah kids to teach, it's hard to find the time to do that intentionally, because I don't know if I could lead a service every week that I had to meet 5 hours and work 5 hours on. But in the opportunities to do it, that's where so much of the magic happens, I think.
I agree. And part of it is the template that we used. I feel that's super important. And so if there's clergy listening going, yeah, you hippies, we don't have time for that. It's exactly that list that Eliana the litany of our responsibilities. We got time just to go through it and make sure that it all makes sense. We haven't missed anything. But to actually, it's a lot. So the template that I'm talking about is, here's a prayer, here's a transition. Here's a prayer, here's a transition. So it's just having the awareness that there has to be a way to get from one to the other and to make it intentional, because you can have it there and not be intentional about it. But to have that awareness and have that template and then take a little time. So if you're listening and you have not enough time, remember, Eliana and I have never built a service before. So it took us a while to build rapport about that. But you folks out there listening, many of you do have rapport with your co-leaders, or you're just doing it on your own. So It's just up to you. So it won't take you 5 hours theoretically, or at least not after the first time. But then the second value of the transition is that it takes the clunkiness out of the ritual. And clunkiness, to me, is speed bumps. It's the places where people are taken out of the moment and into thinking about the text they didn't answer that day and stuff like that. And when there's a flow with transitions that have integrity, we have more opportunity to stay present. That's my feeling. There's a danger to get too scripted, as I talked about when we first started. So you just got to find that balance so that it breathes. And part of that balance is just having the awareness and allowing spontaneous things to come in. For instance, we had crafted every transition and each thing that we were going to do because we had very limited time. And then I said to people, all right, we're going to do an inventory, which I was supposed to only be like a 1-minute thing, an inventory of what you're feeling. And it ended up being a 10-minute thing because I realized, this is a time, a sensory inventory where we can expand out to 7 levels, a kind of a meta meditation, METTA, meta, where you're, first you're inventorying how you're feeling, then how does it feel between you and the person next to you, then the third level, how does it feel out to the perimeters of the room, 4th, how does it feel outside to the perimeters of this neighborhood, 5, out to the perimeter of the city, 6, out to the perimeter of the bioregion, 7, out to the perimeter of the whole universe, and then coming back home and tapping. And when we got to level number 6, the whole bioregion, I took people on a little journey up the mountain from the Piedmont to the mountains of North Carolina. And I said, and you're passing a sign. And that sign tells you this is a town called Old Fort. It's right at the foot of the mountains. And if you have a roll of masking tape, you can change the O of Fort to an A. And then you can keep going on your journey. And, that's all it took for people to understand this ritual is going to breathe. So,
can I tell you that when you did that during the actual service, and I don't think you clarified the O in Fort, because you said, and you can change the O to an A. And I thought, Aldfort?
Oh, no.
Aldfort? I got it once people started laughing, but it took me a moment. What's so funny about Aldfort? But it was so brilliant, and it's what people needed. And the fellows connected it to an exercise that we did, an experience we did the day before over Shabbat, where we did a blessing scavenger hunt and invited people to go even just around the perimeter of the synagogue and notice the diversity and the beauty in the nature that we are a part of and that surrounds us. And so taking people on that journey in our consciousness, I think, was very important, right? There are plenty of places where we didn't end up doing the thing that we said we were going to do, but I only feel comfortable improvising if I have a good plan. Like once I have a good plan, I feel way more comfortable. You got to have a script to go off script. And I wanted to share also what you said about the kind of template that a transition can be very short.
Oh, yeah.
This is something that comes up in the work a lot. And the fellows who are all teachers of tefillah were talking about it too. We might use a transition to dig very deeply into a particular tefillah and explore it and invite ourselves into it. And then the next time we come across that tefillah, we can do a little boop, a little touch, just a little sprinkling. It doesn't have to be a whole thing. It can be, let us open up to love. Can you open your heart to a feeling of unconditional love? As we sing Ahava Rabbah on page 74.
Mm-hmm. Or a little.
It's like 10 words. Yeah.
Like you said, 5 words, 7 words, just something that establishes a little kavanah about it. And sometimes for me, a transition, for those of you who are transition phobic, are like, you guys are crazy. We don't have time for transitions between everything. It's just an intentionality about it as opposed to just clunky changing your capo on the guitar. It's like speak singing, Sprechstimme, like you were just doing. That's a beautiful transition. Or even just...
Is that the German word? Mm-hmm. Can you say that again?
Sprechstimme. It's a term for music. So a lot of composers in the early part of the 20th century, I don't know a lot, would write music that was sort of spoken and sung and talked and spoke, and they'd go back and forth. And then they would talk for a second, and then... So when you start singing and talking like that, I love it. And it keeps us in a sacred space, and it does something to our nervous systems and to our brain waves that... just like Alzheimer patients that respond to singing, I think we all have that capacity to respond to the sung version of something in a different way that takes us out of our normal mundane way of responding. And so the transitions, even if it's just a silence or a breath, as long as it's intentional, it just takes away from that stumbling from one thing to the next as if they're unrelated.
Yeah. And the train thing makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, the first service I ever went to that used instruments, because where I grew up, we didn't use musical instruments on Shabbat. This was in high school. Yeah. I'll have to ask my mom where it was, because it was in like an Elks Lodge or a Mason Lodge. And it was a bunch of us in these hard plastic chairs, and this guy at the front of the room with a guitar. And it was prayer, stop, fumble, figure out prayer, prayer. And it just felt so disconnected to me.
Yeah.
And so, of course, in my kind of black and white thinking of adolescence, I thought, all services with instruments are bad, right? Instead of realizing as I got older that the music and the instruments are a tool. It's all tools, and you can use a tool for good and you can use a tool for bad. You can use a hammer to put a nail in a wall, or you can hit somebody on the head with it. Like it's not necessarily about the tool. It's about how it's being used. Yeah. And that speak singing in a lot of ways does the same thing as if I was noodling and speaking over the music. It's holding that container and allowing it to be in the same part of the brain or in the same family. I don't remember who it was that said that for them, the difficulty in tefillah was the switch between right brain and left brain, that there would be a song and music and this kind of emotionality and, feeling of spirit and play and imagination. And then the rabbi's kavanah and the calling of pages kind of shifts them out of that mindset. And then, I have to get back into the flow. But like, I was just there. Now I'm not.
Yeah, I completely identify with that. And what a balancing act. It's not like there's one way to do it, or that there's like you can just learn and then bam, you're done. It's constantly toggling back and forth, this oscillation within oneself and within the community, seeing what the community needs. So I was listening on my way here, I was listening to the radio, to Christian radio. I really enjoy listening to Christian radio because there's so much resonance in the songs with Jewish thought. And I'm always like hearing how it's shifted and how it's reconfigured and rearticulated. And also, just as a musician, the production values are super high. You can, like, we'll be driving down the
That's
road
for
with
sure.
my wife, and she'll go, we'll turn to a station. Within 2 seconds, we know, it doesn't matter what they're saying, we know it's Christian radio because of the sound of it. And so I'm always like, wow, listen to how clear that is, and listen to how that, and quite often it's, what's the word, neutered, because it's so clean. I feel like it's taken the texture out. And so when you talk about this oscillation between right and left brain, that is a narrow bridge to walk down, to keep both of them in balance, or to allow oneself to be leaning more into one than the other for the bulk of the service, so that it becomes a magical journey. If the whole thing is a right brain journey, it's like doing math. So dare I say, we're trying to lean to the left and keep some vestiges of right in there, so that by the end of the thing we might remember what happened and have some consideration for it. Disturb us, Adonai, we say during our liturgy in Mishkan Tefillah in the Reform, so that we won't get too complacent and so our prayer won't be neutered and have all its texture gone. It has to constantly consider and reconsider, and yet stay in that mythic, beautiful, expanded place that ends up feeling triumphant and transcendent.
It's important what you're bringing up about balance. I think that came up in our reflection with the fellows a lot, about how Jewish sacred heritage in general, and tefillah in particular, we think is teaching us how to hold two truths at once often, right? The truth that the world is a place of sadness and brokenness and grief and needs fixing, and the hand that says the world is a beautiful place full of wonder and amazement. And the idea of a gesher tzar ma'od, of a narrow bridge between right brain and left brain, I love, because I also don't want a service that is devoid of any thinking, right? How do we engage the brain? Because one of the points, I think, of kavanot, or using kavanot, what we're kind of colloquially calling like a little intention before a tefillah, is giving people more tidbits, more context, something interesting about the prayer, maybe what a particular word means, or the etymology, the root of a word, who wrote it, where did it come from, what are some midrashim, some commentaries on it. Not all of that at once, but just like one of those things, it can be a key that unlocks a different part of the tefillah for us that we had never seen before. And so you're right that it's not just about staying fully in a left brain place. It's about how do we bring in these pieces of knowledge in ways that are additive and helpful on the journey, because there are ways to do it that might just make people feel bad about not knowing enough, which the fact that our liturgy is in Hebrew is already barrier enough, and already people might come in feeling like they don't know enough or don't have enough. So I always feel like my goal is to make it more accessible and open, and part of that is sharing these tidbits of wisdom in ways that are additive and meant to be empowering instead of the opposite.
What's interesting to me that you reminded me of, the last 2 biennials, URJ biennials ago, I went to a session that was called Classical Reform Worship. You know, Classical Reform, it was sort of very classical music oriented, and the compositions were, and it was from that European tradition. And the room was packed, by the way. There was probably 100, 200 people in a very small space for Classical Reform. And to me, I felt like I was at a funeral. It was just so staid and so somber, and it's everything I was running from when I decided I didn't want to be Jewish anymore in my mid-20s. But there was a change after that, and I decided I did want to be Jewish. But I needed to please keep that austerity and that total whatever it was away from me. And these people were loving it. And I had to really learn to honor that. Like, wow, they are being fed by this. And this is their place of comfort, their place of nurture. And to the reason I'm saying all this, you're talking about that balance point between the left and the right. And it really depends on your community, and it depends on what's going on in the community. Maybe it's a time for just somberness, and where you're at, all that kind of mixed together, and then maybe what the agenda is, the larger sort of, what we call that across time, the diachronic, I call it the diachronic agenda, like long term, as opposed to the synchronic in this moment agenda. Maybe that's necessary. There's a more left brain service. And so I'm always trying to get services to lean to the right, meaning to lean more into the realm of the creative and the mythic and the expansive, and keeping a finger on the left brain and the logic and the academic or whatever, and the definitions of things, but with a little more weight to that exploratory, out of time, right brain thing. So to your point of the balance between right and left, I want to tell you about an adventure I had at 2 biennials ago. I went into this session, and it was called Classical Reform Worship. And this was old school reform stuff from like before 1940.
Wait, no, sorry to interrupt you, Billy, but I think you're right. I just Googled it. I think I was using it wrong. I think the left brain is the analytical one and the right brain is the non-analytical one. I know, now I'm confused.
Left brain.
We can leave this in. It's the messiness, yeah?
Okay, so what we need to do at some point during this podcast is just edit in someone going, not left brain, right brain. Just, or if you have the visuals, then he means right brain, something like that. I don't remember.
Well, the article I'm reading now, and I think of this too, right? It's saying, let's quote health psychologist Grace Torek, PsyD, when she says, oftentimes we think of right brain thinkers being the more creative types, more artistic or free-spirited. Left brain thinkers are considered more rigid, logical, and detail-oriented, but that's not really accurate when we break down the science. Because like a lot of binaries, it doesn't actually hold up. But like a lot of binaries, especially Jewish binaries or Jewish, like the rabbis love to put things into categories, right? These are the 4 types of learners. These are the 4 types of children at the Passover Seder. But we put those into binaries specifically so we can see all of those types reflected in us, because it's never actually truly one or the other. So, so I think we could leave this in, because when I think of a classical reform service, or a service with perhaps like an organ and a choir, it can tap into a sense of grandeur and transcendence, and praying through the ears, through listening as a mode, which sometimes I think that we've really, like the pendulum has swung completely the other way, in that we think that singing is the only mode of prayer. And when we're asked to listen as a posture of prayer, we don't know what to do. That might be a different conversation. But in terms of thinking about like when that's appropriate, I feel, as much as I think Yom Kippur is joyous and shouldn't be as somber as we often see it as, I'll take a gorgeous choir on Yom Kippur. I'll take an organ on Yom Kippur. There's times and space for that. But in general, because it's not just about the somberness, it's about like the uptightness. I could even see it in your body when you were talking about it, right? Kind of got rigid in your body.
And they were rigid.
And I started thinking, they were rigid. We're sitting at pews, right? I've been using the phrase de-Protestantization, and I don't know if I came up with it, but I realize I've said it on the pod a couple of times, that what we're doing kind of by bringing back the ecstatic element and the movement elements and the even like crying out and shouting and singing, wailing and taking up space and moving around the room and not just sitting in our pews, right? This is the de-Protestantization of American Judaism, I think, or it's part of that.
Yeah.
I think it's important, right? Why did those people choose to have that be their music and have that be what their buildings looked like? Because assimilation was seen as the gateway to safety.
Yeah.
And it isn't really. So we might as well pray in ways that feel moving and meaningful.
And I hear, in my mind's eye, I see people out there maybe being fearful about the idea of people wailing in the middle of a service. And I would feel uncomfortable with that in most contexts because it's so out of character for what we have in services. And that's interesting. That maybe is not your standard service. It's so important, I believe, to recognize there are different kinds of contexts for service. It's not just services. There's services with 3 people where you can really relate to each other. There's a service with the entire membership of the congregation where that's a kol olam kulo, that you're trying to reach across the aisle and not make anybody too angry and sort of keep the community together. And then there's the service where you're trying to push every button possible because it's time to wake people up out of complacency. So yeah, it really depends, doesn't it? And
it really does. Yeah. Well, you saying the word services over and over again, what came to my mind was the question, what are we in service of?
Yeah.
And that perhaps an answer to that question might help us create a particular gathering experience for a particular context. Because you're right. Wailing might not, it feels like, ooh, like we can't do that here. On the other hand, if we're using our sacred traditions blueprint for how do we experience and process grief.
Yeah.
I was talking with my friends yesterday about how we think Judaism does grief really well in a way that non-Jewish friends who have lost a loved one, someone was saying, yeah, and they just went back to normal.
Yeah.
There wasn't a memorial. They didn't have loved ones around. They just kept doing things as opposed to our tradition, which gives space to grief. But you're right in terms of context. Like the Tisha B'Av service is not the same as any other service because it's the architecture of it is designed to give us space for grief.
Yeah.
Which is very particular.
And even without getting that specific about like a holiday like Yom Kippur or Tish B'Av, every Shock-arit or every Mincha or every Mariv service might be different in terms of what's being called for, what's the intention there. So it can resonate in all those ways.
It really can. I want to take a step back. We could talk about this service and tefillah in general for a long time, and I have a feeling this isn't going to be our last conversation about it, which I'm excited about. But you said you dropped a little hint when you said when I decided not to be Jewish anymore in my 20s, and I just kind of want to go back to the seesaw of that decision.
Yeah.
Like, what did tefillah mean in your life? What was your relationship to tefillah, to God, to Judaism growing up, and how did the sea see and when did it saw back over, if that makes sense?
How did the sea see and how did the sea saw? I see, said the blind man, and he took out his hammer and saw. I went to summer camp when I was 8. It was a YMCA camp, and we had chapel. It was non-denominational chapel on Sundays. And that was the first time in my life that I felt like the benediction of a bird song and the rustle of the leaves as a kind of a prayer. I remember sitting there, there was a moment of silence at 8 years old, and they were very explicit. They said, take a moment to just listen to what's going on around you, the trees and the birds. And I just sat there. And it felt like a massage, a sonic massage. And I went, there is something special here. Even though I was a little resistant, I always had this chip on my shoulder that said, these grown-ups, they're trying to pull one over on me. They're trying to tell me it's one way, and I think they're messing with me. But in that moment, I went, oh, I got this little download of like the holiness of creation. And so I put a pin in that moment without knowing it, just like, I'm going to hold on to that. I didn't say that, it just happened. And some also at that summer camp, it's called Camp Martin Johnson up in Irons, Michigan, near the Little Manistee Forest. Big Bass Lake and Little Bass Lake, just around the corner from Nataka's Tavern. It may still be there. And we sat around a campfire with a counselor playing a guitar and another one doing a rhythm on a bucket and somebody playing a harmonica. And they sang this cool new song. It was called Blowin' in the Wind. And I remember looking around at all these faces around me that were glowing in the firelight, and you couldn't see their bodies. You could just see their faces, and their bodies were in shadow. And I thought, this is how it's been for thousands of years. People gathering around a fire and singing together and telling stories. I said, this is really timeless. This is amazing. It was another epiphany moment. And so I had these experiences of the sacred, of spirituality at a young age, 8, 9 years old. Third thing that happened there was the counselors. These were serious hippies. I mean, it was 1972 when 72, 73, I was 8. And the counselors were in their 20s. And they were talking about meditation. And I was sort of suspect, like, what are you talking about? They said, man, you just sort of empty your mind, man, and you just breathe deep and you focus on one thing, and it just trips you out, man, the way it opens you. And I nodded very skeptically, but I didn't forget. And I wanted to know, because they seemed like they were being honest. So those three things, my chapel experience, my campfire experience, and that my counselors who I looked up to tremendously, who were talking about meditation and other realms, invisible realms that were being tangible. And then I would go to synagogue and I would hear cantor Abraham Lubin singing, and it was so gorgeous. Getting the prayers didn't make sense to me. They're very repetitive. Seemed like we said one prayer and we maybe changed one word, and suddenly it's called a different prayer, and then there's a third prayer that's exactly the same except one word. Like, I didn't get it. I got into the music, but I didn't get into that. And there was an austerity. This is the 70s in a conservative shul, and it was dark and austere, and there was right ways and wrong ways, and I was bored. And then I got to college. I mean, I was bar mitzvahed and I went to Hebrew high school, once a week, Hebrew high school, through high school, trying to stay connected, and I wasn't feeling it. I was getting it in my mind, but I was like, there's got to be something to feel here. Something's missing. And I went and tried it out at college, and it felt kind of insular. I felt like this is not what it's about. This felt like circling the wagon. What's going on? I don't know. It didn't feel right. Went to the kosher co-op over at Oberlin College, and I don't want to diss it for anybody who was really into that, but it was not my place. Like, theoretically, this is my people, and I needed to be over in the food co-ops where they were throwing forks into the ceiling and having 3-hour policy meetings about whether butter was on snacking, things like that. And so somehow I could feel that. It was visceral. And I left college and I was in a lot of turmoil. I was in spiritual crisis a lot. And so I, would be calling out to God in whatever way seemed right. I was learning about meditation and learning about chanting and Buddhist meditation. I was going to Native American sweat lodges. I was looking for anything that I could feel that would give me a felt sense of this otherness, this connectedness to the universe. I went to a New Age Christian church called Jubilee, and it was very ecumenical. They would have rabbis and Buddhist priests and stuff coming in, and it was spiritual smorgasbord, and nothing was solid. And so finally, and here's the point of my story, I basically left Judaism. It just wasn't working for me. And I trying all these things. Finally, I said, you know what? I need a template to come back to our template idea. I need a calendar that's got clear delineations of something once a year that I do and something once every quarter that I do and every week that I do and every day that I do. I wanted all these that sort of hierarchy, that taxonomy of prayer and connection. And I'm just going to make my own religion. I'm going to make my own calendar and my own religion. And I said, I want to be connected to the earth. I want to be connected to my body. I want to be connected to people. That's going to be what my religion's about: the earth, my body, the people. Maybe there's something else out there, but I know there is something else out there. But I'm going to find it through these things, because that's too airy-fairy for me to just pray to that. I need to be connected. And so I divided the year into the cross quarters. I said, I'll do something on the solstices and on the equinoxes. That feels connected to my Native American interests, Native American spirituality interests, and to all kinds of other peoples of the earth pagan practices. And I opened up my normal calendar and I wrote in on the fall's equinox, fast and sweat. I'm going to do a sweat lodge to rid myself of the summer excesses. And there was Yom Kippur, like a couple days later. I went, oh, that's interesting. And then I flipped forward to the next cross quarter, which was the winter solstice. I said, I'm going to do a return of the light ritual and do something with fire, coming into the darkest, narrowest Mitzrayim of the year, and then preparing to emerge from that. And I wrote in this ritual, a fire ritual. I went, oh, there's Hanukkah, right? Near, like a week away. Cool. And then I flipped to the next cross quarter, which was the spring equinox. And I said, I'm going to do a re-greening of there's Passover. And right at that moment, I went, oh, somebody thought of this already. And I must have skipped the day of Hebrew school when they talked about it, if they talked about it. And I hadn't read Arthur Waskow's book, so I wasn't really in touch with the idea that this is very intentional. And I'm so glad that I blundered into it. I was embarrassed in that moment. Like, I was all by myself, but I was like, I hope nobody saw me doing this. Like, does everybody know this already? Because, whoa, it kind of like bopped me on the head. And in that moment, I went, look at that. The Jewish template, the Jewish matrix, is a earth-centered, season-centered, pagan, grounded matrix. I can do that. I was born Jewish. I've got ancestors back to the Maharal of Prague who were Jewish. I know the old folks in my family. My Oma was born in Alsbach, Germany in 1905. And, when I was born, her mother was holding me. Her mother was born in like 1860. And so I had this visceral connection back to the old world and the melodies they sang. I'll never forget my Oma singing German melodies at the Passover Seder, things she heard as a child, which inevitably had been around forever before that. I said, I've got all that in my DNA and in my ears. I'll be Jewish and I'll dress it up. So everything you and I are talking about is my process of uncovering and recovering, recovering both in like getting it back from the austerity that was piled on it, but also recovering it with new trappings to have it be meaningful and feel it in my body. That was a long version of my journey back to Judaism story, but that's it. That's the story.
It is a beautiful, beautiful story, and pieces I bet that will resonate with a lot of folks. I mean, when you asked, like, was I absent at Hebrew school the day that they taught this, I'm not sure that it's ever seen in that holistic way. I think more now, certainly, that people are recognizing the inherent earth nature and, land-based matrix. I liked your use of the word matrix. I'm thinking about our friend Cantor Josh Ehrlich, who said to me once, he said, I'm working on a theory that Judaism is just a book club and a time management system.
I remember. I love
right.
that. Yeah.
It's a good one, but it's right. It's like here to help us manage our time if we see it in a holistic way. So often I'm thinking also now, you talked about being on the train and it's like prayer, 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 and we're not necessarily looking at the journey and the connection between all of them. I think the same could be said about the calendar and the holidays. Holiday, holiday, holiday.
Yeah.
What is the arc of the year? What is it taking us through, right? There's the kind of mythic imagination history of our people bit, and there's the living in harmony with the earth bit, and there's the kind of cosmic personal bit and the community bit, and they're all kind of layered on top of each other. I like the idea of this matrix. Is matrix a plural or a not plural word? I was like, matrix, is that the singular of matrix?
May try.
May try. That works for me. I'd love to hear also how Judaism then found its way into your music and where that came in as part of your kind of journey as a musician and songwriter and performer.
Yeah. Well, it was slow, but my buddy Rabbi Fleischer, Rabbi Randy Fleischer, he's in St. Louis, Susan Talvey at CRC, Central Reformed Congregation. And he and I were camp counselors long before he was a rabbi at Camp Thunderbird up in Bemidji, Minnesota. And he really dug the music I did when I was a counselor there. I was already a musician at that point. And my nickname at camp was Bongo, and he coined that phrase. And his nickname at camp was Dylan, because he loved Bob Dylan, and he sang kind of like Bob Dylan. Anyway, I'd come out with my first album, and he says, Billy, you know your music is really Jewish, right? And I said, no. He says, everything you see is through a very Jewish lens. You just can't get away from it. And it's manifested in your songs. And it took me years to really know what he meant. He was looking at it at that point because he had started rabbinical school and he was examining things deeply, which I hadn't examined those things deeply yet. But specifically, besides the fact that I have I can say I have a Jewish soul, and everything that comes out of me, it comes from and through that. Specifically in the 90s, I needed to make some extra money, and I went to the synagogue in Asheville, Beth HaTefillah, for services, and the rabbi said, hey, do you want to do services with us once a month or so? And I went, and you pay people for this? He goes, yeah. So that was the very mundane, mercenary kind of intro to it. But I wasn't invested in it in a big way with my composing. It was just my body was there, and I was enjoying singing with people and being part of the community. And then he said, here's a song, it needs a new accompaniment. And suddenly I was composing, and it was Adonai Sifatai Tiftach, I think. Open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. It was something in that realm. And I created a new accompaniment, and then it had meaning for me. And that was the first step. And then, trying to make a short story really long here, I wrote this song called Variations on a Theme because I was grappling with the situation in Israel-Palestine. The Arab-Israeli conflict. And I had this thought, at the time I thought it was very original, and maybe it was, that no one is more right than the other, that there's a kind of a balancing going on here. And when they do this and we do this, it's just variations on the same theme. And I played it for the rabbi, and he said, I see where you're coming from. I think you did a pretty good job with that. It wasn't necessarily his opinion, but he agreed. And then some people got way out of whack about it. Like, how can you? I mean, you can imagine creating a sense of equality about it. Are you out of your mind, Billy? No. I didn't think I was. I thought I was really on the right track. And it got very contentious. And the rabbi said, Billy, why don't you go over to the West Bank and spend some time there and see how it is? Oh my God, my rabbi is sending me to the what? It just blew my mind that he would actually suggest that. This was the late 90s. I just didn't know there was these trips you could do. I don't know if they existed then. They might have, where they would, Birthright Unplugged didn't exist back then, and olive planting brigades in Nablus with Jewish folks, that didn't exist. Anyway, I kept that in my mind for 10 years. And then I did. I went in 2009. And I confirmed what I thought, that it's just people. It's just people here and just people there. No one is crazier than the others. And forgive me if I've angered any listeners, but my feeling is it's just people. Everybody's crazy. Everybody's beautiful. It's full spectrum, no matter what people. And certainly we could talk a lot about that. And so I came back with this renewed sort of vision of what Judaism needed to be. And then I started to write songs from that renewed vision, that this is looking for a sense of equanimity about how one approaches all prayer in the world and all peoples. And everything was coming through that filter. So I'd go to the service and I'd be really dissatisfied, which is an essential ingredient for me, to be dissatisfied, because then there's a catalyst to do something about it. And I'd hear these prayers and started writing them. And then simultaneously, I went to Havana Shira because I was making music for my temple and I wanted to learn about the whole tribe of folks doing that. And I met Craig Taubman and Debbie Friedman and Danny Massang and Shira Klein and Rick Recht, all at the first one. Ellen Allard and Ellen Dreskin, and forgive me if I forget any of them, and Jeff Klepper. I mean, they're all there just hanging out in the room playing. And they liked what I did. And they said, keep going. And Debbie Friedman came to a concert I did in New York. I'm like, this is like the matriarch of this tradition. She's like coming and she's hooting and hollering through okay. So there's this embrace going on. And then Havana Shira asked me to come be a teacher the same year that Rick asked me to come be a teacher. And basically it was doors opening. I didn't pursue it. And I remember thinking in that moment, these doors are opening. What would happen if I walked through them? And that was the day. It was just doors opening, walking through. If you need to edit this down, you can just go straight to that. Doors opening, walking through.
Walking through.
Yeah. I'd say the evolution in a nutshell, take this part out if it doesn't serve. Going to my synagogue in Asheville, them encouraging me to go to Havana Shira. And then 10 years later, because of those experiences and writing music through the lenses that I'd polished, Havana Shira and Song Leader Bootcamp the same year invited me to teach, and then it grew from there, going through the doors when the doors opened.
I'm resonating so much with your story, and I'm so grateful for it, because my first Havana Shira was 2013. I'm thinking about it a lot, the 10-year anniversary of my first Havana Shira. And you were on faculty that year, I believe. And I, no offense, Fred, but I didn't know who you are at the time. Grew up in a conservative synagogue. I didn't know a lot of Jewish. I didn't know who Dan Nichols was until 2013. I didn't know of a lot of the Gedolim, the great ones of this craft, because it wasn't I was writing Jewish songs, but I wasn't a song leader, and I didn't even know that really was a job that you could have. But one of the reasons that first Hava was so meaningful was because of your music and your leadership in sessions that I took with you that I will never forget.
Really?
Really, really. I remember sitting in, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the building, but it's the round one that always smelled funny with the carpet. And you leading us in these tones and moving the chords up and down with your hands. And it reminded me of those IMAX movies where they show like the whales in the water, and there's always that kind of ethereal ooh, right, with the whales. And I was like, we're making the whale music right here, all of us together.
Yeah.
And we did Hollow Bamboo and we did Tango, but it must have been at one of the faculty shares where you did one, I bet it was. And I felt immediately, because I was going through my own tumultuous God journey, which we haven't even touched on the God stuff. We're definitely going to have you back, Billy. My goodness. And I was like, I think he's...
You just coined a new phrase. Tumultuous. Tumultuous. Okay, so...
That was tumultuous, Jewish.
It was a very tumultuous time.
It was tumultuous.
Yeah, for a woman,
it was.
Jewish time. That's right.
Oh, that's true. That maybe sounds better. But I heard your music and I thought, I think that's the closest to my theology that I've ever heard another person articulate. And it was so meaningful then. And every time coming back to those songs and the ones that you've written since resonate with me in a way that I feel like you were taking it seriously and playfully. Whereas often God's a word on the page that we say and an idea we have in our head about the world that we were promised that doesn't exist. And you got to it in such a deep and playful way. I was like, this is it. I have a place here. I have a journey that I can go on. Oh. And it's kind of the same, like, 10 years after that, now I am on faculty with you at these places. And it's just like, I feel like I'm about to cry. Like the idea that we're part of this field that is lifting people up and that we get to be colleagues with the people that inspired us in the first place. I'm just in awe and immense gratitude. Like, I get to exist. Not only do I get to exist on the planet at the same time as you, Billy, but we found each other's orbit somehow.
Yeah.
And that had an infinitesimally small chance of happening, and yet it did. And I'm really grateful for that.
Me too. I didn't realize that was such a part of your journey. That's cool. Happy to have been part of the foundation of the inception. Yeah.
I'm so grateful. Now, I am going to have you on another time to talk about God, but I would love to close first. I'd love to play us out on one of your songs. We can play a recording at the end, and maybe one that's feeling particularly resonant with you from this conversation, if you wanted to maybe introduce it and give it some context.
The first one that comes to mind is a song called My Life So Far, and it's on a CD called Life So Far. And it's a 12-minute song, 15 if you play the outro. So you may not want to do that one, or you might, but it talks about a lot of what I've described. It talks about my summer camp adventure, my first really transcendent spiritual ritual, which was in college, where we had a full moon ritual and we made it all up and we couldn't see the moon. Have you heard this song before?
I have. It's beautiful. And
then suddenly,
the journey. Yeah.
So, that'd be interesting. Otherwise, God is in would be the way to go out, because there's theology. Even though it's a little dated now, there's stuff that doesn't belong in there anymore. I need to update that. Or the song One is good. Or the song To Be One, which came in a dream, which is my Shema. Or my Via Hafta. That would be a good one to go out on, just because it's insane.
Ooh. It's a masterpiece. And I hope our listeners, no matter which song we decide to play at the end, will find Billy's music, because you have written some of my favorite songs that have ever been written, just like period. It's really, you're so masterful and deft and smart and silly and heart-opening in all of these beautiful ways. So listeners, we hope we'll link to all of it in the show notes, but please find Billy's music. Just to close, Billy, I'm wondering if you had a blessing for us and our listeners. Is there a blessing you could bless us with?
Yeah. Count your blessings. Count your toys. Moment of silence. Moment of noise.
Amen. Thank you so much for joining us today, Billy. What an absolute joy.
My privilege. Thank you. Thanks for being my teacher. This is good. More to come, I hope. I pray.
Yes, please. And thank you so much for listening. You can check out our show notes at lightlab.co and also sign up at lightlab.co to receive our newsletter. We're hoping to have one out with every episode with some more behind the scenes, what we're up to, some more tefillah goodness. Christy Dodge edits our episodes. Thank you, Christy. Our show notes are put together by Yafa Englander. Thank you, Yafa. And our wisdom weaver, Rachel Kaplan, who recently over the summer joined the team, has been working on copy and notes and getting things out. Perhaps podcast producer, I might say. We can say produced by our wisdom weaver, Rachel Kaplan. Check us out on all the socials at thelight.lab, and we hope to be with you again very soon. We're going to exit this interview with Billy's Ve'ahavta, and I encourage you, if you're in a place where you can stop and put in headphones and close your eyes, that you do so. We'll see you soon.
All that was, is, and will be. With all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, and may it be all these things
Asher Anochi Mitzavecha Hayom
this day
Alevavecha
be upon your heart, deep in the core of your being.
Veshinanta
Teach them
Levanecha
to yourself,
Vedibarta Bam
and speak of them an eternal invocation
Veshivtecha Vetecha
in your home
Uvlechtecha Vaderech
and on your way. The twitch and quick without.
Uveshochbecha Uvkumecha
When you lay down, and when you rise, ascending.
Ukshartam leot al yadecha
Bind them as a sign upon your hands, bound with all others.
Vehayu letotafot beinenecha
And let them be a symbol between your eyes. Narrow your vision.
Uchtavtam
Inscribe them
al mezuzot beitecha
on the doorposts of your house
Uvisharecha
and your gates. Every threshold, every passage, a sanctified renewal.
Leman tizkeru
Thus you shall remember
Vasitem et kol
all
mitzvotai
my commandments. Sacred opportunity.
Vitem kedoshim
And be holy
Elohechem
to your sovereign. All that was, is, and will be.
Ani Adonai Elohechem
Quantum mechanic.
Asher hotzeti etchem
Led you out merciful gravity
Me'eretz Mitzrayim
from a narrow place, constricted in a land of burning sand.
Lihiot lachem lelohim
Your source of all forces, pulsing integrity.
Ani Adonai